Welcome back to Vantage Point, where we take a look at some of the key events that took place in Sri Lanka over the past 2 weeks, and we get some political analysis on these events and how they would impact us as a country. And in conversation with me, we have Dr. Dayan Jayatilleka. Doctor, before the break we were speaking about the oral report of Ms. Navi Pillay, who was here in the island to assess the condition in Sri Lanka. Now, in that report she said that Sri Lanka has been given a time of 6 months until March next year to really come up with a plan of carrying out a credible, convincing inquiry into the allegations of human rights. What do you think the government should now do before March 2014?
Well, I know what it shouldn't do. It shouldn't keep saying, look, we decide on these things, and, you know, sticking its tongue out at Navi Pillay, or looking in the mirror and seeing in Israel and saying, you know, the Israelis don't take notice of these things, so we are not going to either. That's not our situation. We are vulnerable, and this sort of thing is not decided by us. It's decided by a vote in the UN Human Rights Council. So we mustn't be under any illusions. We mustn't behave like an ostrich burying its head in the sand. There is a clear and present danger of a mechanism being proposed by Navi Pillay in her written submission in March and acted upon by the Council by means of a resolution. So that's very serious. And yes, there is a way out. The way out is not compliance with what High Commissioner Pillay says. The way out is to preempt. And this can be preempted very simply indeed and very quickly. It can be preempted by the implementation of some of the core recommendations pertaining to this issue in the report of the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission appointed by the President. Now, there's no point in unfolding a national action plan or national inaction plan and then saying there's a timetable and look, it takes time to do these things, we need time and space. I mean, that's all unhelpful nonsense. The LLRC report has focused very precisely on the issue of allegations of war crimes and crimes against humanity. It is concluded that at no time did the Sri Lankan Armed Forces, as a matter of policy, wittingly target Tamil civilians. At no time was there a policy of anything like genocide or quasi-genocide or even killing large numbers of civilians. And this is not just asserted. There's a very large and elaborate chapter on this, where everything is sifted through. But the LLRC report goes on to say two other things. It lists, I think 10, I may be wrong, maybe 12 incidents, specific incidents, where it says on the surface of it, it looks like crimes have indeed been committed. Not by the Sri Lankan Armed Forces as a whole, as a matter of policy, but by certain rotten apples, they don't use the term. But there have been aberrations, there have been exceptions, and it looks like crimes were committed. And they list them. One is the Trincomalee 5. There is a case, but the senior most officer named in that has not been arrested. That's one problem. Two, the ACF aid workers, the 17 aid workers, found face down, handcuffed, shot in the back of the head, and that included women in Mudur. And then one of the other incidents, and most of the other incidents are immediately after the war, the morning after, as it were, May 19th, where there have been eyewitnesses who testified credibly that Serendis were put on board buses and they've never been heard of again. One of them is the husband, or the late husband, of the lady who contested the Northern Provincial Council elections on the TNA ticket and won, the second highest numbers of preferences, Anandi Sasidaran.
Yes.
The husband's name is Elidan. I think he was an LTT guy. So the LLRC lists these and says, look, these have to be investigated. These. Not the last stage of the war, not 40,000 civilians. No. All that's nonsense. But this stuff has to be cleared up. The LLRC report has another and very important recommendation. It says appoint a high-powered commissioner to investigate these and human rights in general. In other words, a Navi Pillai locally, a Sri Lankan High Commissioner for Human Rights, with a secretariat which is empowered, a secretariat with teeth. Now this is the LLRC. It's easily done. I mean, all that has to be done, all the President has to do, is talk to our most distinguished living Sri Lankan, Justice C.G. Veeramantri. I mean, they're on very good terms. I've been at the same table with them a couple of months ago. I know that they get on very well. The President just has to ask Judge Veeramantri, who happens to be in town now, but anyway, even if he isn't, he's somewhere out there in the world. Look, can you help me on this? If you are not willing to serve in this capacity because of seniority, can you name 3 Sri Lankans, one of whom I shall choose? And can you help me design the secretariat, the mandate and the secretariat? How long does it take? Breakfast? Lunch? 10 minutes? 15 minutes? 1 hour? It can be done, and it must be done. If it's somebody who has credibility internationally. I mean, I can think of people like Professor Savitri Gunasekara. I mean, there are people. Someone with international credibility to investigate these, and also as an ombudsperson for human rights in general in this country. We can sell that internationally before 2014 March.
Dr. Jayatilleka, you're talking about this system which you're saying it can be done, it's that easy. But why have we waited so long and not done it? What is your reasosoning behind it? Why do you think is the problem?
Mahina, I mean, if I may switch, look at the Northern Provincial Council election. I had recommended in writing in the newspapers in June, July 2009 that this is the high point of the Sri Lankan state's hegemony, that the provincial council election should be held in 2009. Now, not only didn't anybody listen, I was recalled for saying that, but I had warned in writing that if we do, it's the EPDP that will win, easy to work with. If we don't, it's a TNA that will revive, and that will be more difficult. And that's exactly what happened. Now, in 2009 August, the government held a municipal election, and the government got 54%. Now, surely, Mahina, having tested the waters and won 54%, one would have thought that they would immediately have had the provincial council election in 2009, because if you can have a municipal election, you can have a provincial council election. But they didn't do that. Now, I think it's all the same thing, because there is a delusion that time is on our side. All we have to do is say no, or tough it out, or lie, or tell half-truths, and tighten our grip, and then, and just say no. But that's not the way the world works. That's not the way how it works even in Sri Lanka. Look at the vote, 78% in the north. The government down to 18% from 54% in August 2009. So it's the same thing. Until March 2014, the government will whistle in the dark and walk into that council, and it won't know what hit it. And the country and the armed forces are at stake.
Now, Navi Pillai did say 2014 March, and we had to clean up our act before 2014 March. You said that a mechanism proposed in the written report would have detrimental consequences for Sri Lanka. Now, you have worked in the UN. You know how the system works. Tell us a little bit about, okay, let's say we don't do what she says by March 2014. I mean, we don't need to listen to her, but if we don't really take the oral submissions into account and work on it, what would that mean for us? What sort of inquiry would this be? What sort of implications would it have for us as a country? You said they've done this inquiry for Syria, for Libya, and we also saw it recently on the Syrian chemical weapons situation. But for Sri Lanka, how would it impact us?
Mahina, Navi Pillai is not the problem. Navi Pillai isn't the solution, but Navi Pillai is a symptom of the problem. What's the problem? The problem is that we are losing space internationally, that we have less and less credibility, that there's more and more criticism. We have got some applause for holding the Northern Provincial Council election, but a lot depends on how we treat the council, whether we are seen to treat it fairly. And I hope we will. I'm not confident about that. Now, Sri Lanka's foreign relations are based on monumental misconceptions. Look what happened a couple of weeks ago. It's not even noticed in the Sri Lankan mainstream media. I don't know whether the government knows. The successor to Bob Blake as Assistant Secretary of State in charge of South Asia is, for the first time, someone of South Asian origin, Ms. Biswal, a relatively young lady. And she came up before the Senate. As usual, you need, there's a public hearing for confirmation. Now, she made a fairly balanced evaluation of Sri Lanka, a little critical, but that was not the problem. The problem is that the government of Sri Lanka thinks that the only people who have an issue with it are these dreadful liberals of the Obama administration and the Republicans. You know, they are gung-ho, they are martial people, they don't believe in this human rights nonsense, and if only they were there, they would have supported us. Now, at Ms. Biswal's hearing, there were sharp, strong criticisms of Sri Lanka. One criticism was that 30 churches, Christian churches, have been attacked. The other criticism is how the Tamils are treated. Now, who made those criticisms? One was the up-and-coming star of the Republican Party, who is billed to be the next, the Barack Obama of the Republicans someday. Marco Rubio, a very mediagenic ex-Cuban emigre family, Republican from Florida. Marco Rubio cross-examined Ms. Biswal about the churches being attacked. The other person, which is even bigger news, who said, you know, what about the way the Tamils are treated? This is dreadful, was Senator John McCain, who's the pin-up of some very high officials in Sri Lanka. That's to do with the United States. Now, India. I've been reading very interesting reports about the government of Sri Lanka hoping that the BJP is going to win the next Indian elections. You know, because the BJP, in the mindset of the government of Sri Lanka, these guys are like us. We are Buddhists and they are Hindus, and it's these westernized, secular Congress guys and these church people, all of them, you know, they're the ones who are messing it up. So the BJP is like us. Last week, there was a strong speech on Indian politics and foreign policy in which the government was criticized and the government was accused of being weak. Two incidents were mentioned, and one of them was that the government isn't protecting Indian fishermen against the Sri Lankan Navy and that the government should push back. Who made that speech? Narendra Modi, the prime ministerial candidate of the BJP. So the government is in a state of deep denial and delusion. And that is the problem. It doesn't understand the world. It doesn't understand how to talk to the world. And therefore, it is sleepwalking into a trap. And if that international mechanism is erected, it will be a UN mechanism. It won't be a fair one. And once that report is in, that report will go to legislatures everywhere in the world. And in the West, they will act on it. And there will be a squeeze, a crunch on Sri Lanka and its army.